Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, it's Casual Friday. I'm back in the driver's seat. And one thing I never noticed about that intro before is that as I come down, it looks like I'm touching your brains to activate you. It's like show on, bink.
That's my
Anyway,
favorite part.
this is Casual Friday. We are the Landlocked Warlocks, of which I'm a member, and my name is GM Jim Heskett. Over there is,
I am Ryan Doyle.
down there is.
Brad Wolf from Tired Ant.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. We're going to do what we usually do, and that's we're going to talk about the newest of the news in the tater pig industry. We have a mostly D&D focused show because they just won't stop coming out with new news. It makes it hard for us to talk about non-WotC things because it's exploding with news right now. So we're going to talk about, well, first we're going to talk about kind of a generic article about some GM advice. We're going to talk about an interview, former WotC bigwig, one of the lead designers of 5th edition, Mike Merles. He gave an interview where he spilled some tea. We're going to talk about Fiends in the Monster Manual. We're going to talk about Elementals in the Monster Manual. And we're also going to give sort of first impressions, more broad first impressions. Maybe we should do that first before the Fiends and Elementals. Probably. We're going to talk about a new WotC adventure that just dropped, a surprise drop called Hold Back the Dead. It's like a tower defense kind of thing. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Dungeons & Dragons movie. And I'm deadly serious with my Marlon Wayans comment down there. I am prepared to discuss all of the Wayans brothers at length. And I'm not even kidding.
Don't threaten us.
Don't threaten me with a good time. Oh, you know what? Somebody vamp for a second while I share my screen here.
Well, I've been on a marathon D&D kick for the last 3 days. So I got to play. I had to be a player for once in a play test on Wednesday night, and then I ran D&D club at my wife's school, so I ran 2 games on Friday morning, or Thursday morning, and then ran my regular Thursday night game. So I played 4 games of D&D in like 24 hours. It's crazy.
Wow. Can you tell us what you were playtesting, or is that top secret?
I'm not sure if I can talk about that yet.
Cool.
But it's related. It's related to a Kickstarter that's going to be coming soon.
Okay. Well, so let's dig into our first topic here on the show. Is that I found this article about advice for new GMs, but I think it's kind of pretty good advice for anyone who runs in-person tabletop games, not just Dungeons and Dragons. But this is 4 tips to get players to sit down and start playing. And tell me if you've ever found yourself in this scenario. You're at D&D night or you're hosting D&D night and the game is supposed to start at 7. People arrive at 7, get set up for 15 minutes. Then they want to bullshit for 45 minutes. Then they want to get out their character sheets and level up. And so it's an hour and a half after start time to actually start playing. Well, this article has some tips for how to minimize that. And it starts off with scheduling social time. You know, like saying we're going to start playing at 8, but you can show up at 7 or 7:30. Or also another way to look at this is just a perspective shift. You're just telling yourself that no matter what time we start, the first 30 minutes, people are just going to talk. And I'm just going to have to accept that. I've gotten to that place with some groups before. Another suggestion is to use a musical cue when it's time. You know, like at the Oscars when they're done, they're ready to move them off the stage. They don't have that giant hook anymore that pulls people off. Now they just play them out with the music. Also, transition between rooms, like you have a hangout room, the eat room. I think having an eating room is a great idea if you take a dinner break. If you can not eat dinner or at the same place you're playing D&D, you're going to get a lot less, pizza grease stains on books. And have one of the players do a recap at the beginning. which I don't that one's not as much related to me as trying to get people going. I do like to have the players do the recap if I can, because then I think they're more likely to take notes. They feel like they're being called on by the teacher at the beginning of the session, and it instills a little bit of fear in them to pay attention, I think. What do you guys think about these bits of advice here?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of use the scheduled social time. I mean, it's like we never stated it outright, but we've just kind of evolved that, you know, you know, you can arrive at 8:30, and we're probably going to BS till 9, but we're going to start playing at 9 unless, there's some, crisis.
Yeah, it took me a long time to not understand, but accept that. It's like, okay, game night starts at whatever. There's a built-in buffer of bullshit. For a lot of us, it's like our main social interaction for the week outside of like a workplace scenario. So it's only natural, I play with friends who I've had for years, who I've only, I only really see at this point once a week. So it's a natural thing, and accepting it has been much more beneficial to my game and my mental health than like fighting it, feeling like a failure, struggling to get everybody on the same page. Um, I used to use music a lot, and that is maybe something I should get back into more often. But I do like the recap as the transitions, almost like, okay, what happened last week for me feels like a natural transitional phase, like back into D&D. And then if I've done it right, last week we kind of hit the ground running. I've ended on a cliffhanger or something.
Yeah, we do a recap too. And I definitely find that useful. Another thing I've started doing is I'll do little like graphics, like little pictures for the different quest lines. So kind of like in a video game, like certain RPG video games, you can go and you can see a list of all the quests that you've activated. So I'll clip together some art and then write a little blurb, and so you have like a 4 square sheet of paper with the 4 most recent quest options, and then I print that out and I have that sitting on the table when players arrive.
Wow.
And that's been pretty cool as a way to help them remember. So when we're sitting around doing that social time at the beginning, they can pick up that sheet of paper and remember, oh yeah, we were doing this with that. And so, the whole picture's worth 1,000 words kind of thing.
One thing I used to do was I have the big vinyl mat as the battle map, and like making everybody move their snacks and books and shit so I can roll it out dramatically is like a moment of Pavlovian cue to like, all right, now we're going.
Yeah.
When I played with Hanker and Fernale at Green Dragon Fest, he did the exact opposite. He had this big map, and so the whole pitch of the game session we were playing is we were fast forwarding far into the future, right? And the events of that day's game are set up by the events of the 2 previous games. It was a really cool setup. But he had the big map that he used in the 2 previous days' games, and he did the whole setup, and then he grabbed the map and just threw it off the table behind him. And he's like, "But that's not where you are. You're here." And then
the flowers are still standing.
That's fun. Any other thoughts on that? You guys ready to move on?
I like Cobalt Press. I like their vibes. I like their products. I like their books. I've run a lot of their monsters. Ran one of their campaigns. I like what those guys are doing over there. Good third-party shop that you don't hear much about right now.
Yeah, very much like Tomo Beast. They were talking about them a lot back in the OGL times.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the OGL times. Anyways,
next topic.
Moving on. Mike Merles, I don't have any images for this, but Mike Merles worked at Wizards of the Coast for a while, was pretty instrumental in a lot of D&D products, and then he left the company several 5 years ago.
ish.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when, but he left the company a few years ago, and he's been doing some other things. He's got a Patreon. He's working on his own game. And he gave an interview um, recently, and he hadn't previously said very much about the end of his time at WotC, and he did kind of address some of that allegedly. I haven't watched it. I watched like the first 2 minutes of it the other day, but I've been way too busy to sit down and watch this hour-long interview. So if either of you have seen it or have read some Cliff's Notes somewhere,
Yeah,
what's the tea?
I managed to squeeze the whole thing in today. I watched it. And I don't think he was let go that long ago. I think it was fairly recently
Oh,
that
was it?
he was because he was laid off in one of the rounds of recent layoffs. I think it was,
Oh.
but he actually left the D&D team like 4 or 5 years ago, and there was some alleged drama around that. And because he kind of disappeared off social media, he stopped doing his pod, like his YouTube videos about game design, and he just kind of vanished. But he was still working for them. In this interview, he said what happened was they moved him over to Magic the Gathering, but it was all kind of very quietly. So he was still employed for quite some time, but he was just, not in the public view. And he said in that interview that most of the stuff that the drama that was like, said about the whole situation, he said most of that wasn't true, but he didn't get into the details of any of that drama. He just said that was a much ado about nothing kind of so that basically implying that whatever that drama was, whatever truth to it there was, didn't have to do with him being moved over to Magic the Gathering. So I don't know.
Nacho says you only need to watch the last 20 minutes. That's where the good stuff is.
Yeah. The last 20 minutes is where they get into his thoughts on 5th edition and the OGL and 5.5. He calls it 5.5. Smart people tend to do that. And so Ryan, did you get a chance to watch it?
I watched the pertinent bits. I was kind of clued into what was about. It's a nice reminder that the TTRPG community, or at least the D&D 5e community, is a bunch of pearl snatching drama queens. Even before the OGL, there was like a legitimate incident that happened, and Mike Merles was kind of like implicated in the internet buzz about it all because he didn't do enough about it because he was there when, like, in the building. I don't want to touch that because I don't know the details enough. But nope, that had nothing to do with anything. It's like, yeah, I switched. Why did you? They pulled you off of D&D. Your name's not on the books anymore. It's like, yeah, I went to work for the other awesome thing that we do all day. Like, I transferred departments at this company that I work at. It's a thing that happens on the daily. It's not a big deal.
Did he say anything about? Sorry.
No.
Did he say anything about why he was quiet during that whole time? Why he never talked about it?
He did say that there was a lot of toxicity, and so I don't know if it was because of the drama, surrounding that one situation, or if it was just toxicity in general because he was a D&D designer. But he said he got off of X because it was very toxic. But then, or at least his experience of it was, he specifically said it that way. But now he's gotten back on social media since he left WotC.
Because it has improved so much in the intervening years.
Well, he said it improved for him. Now that he's not working for WotC, he's not, apparently, like, people aren't taking shots at him and, complaining about, all the stuff that people complain about. But yeah, the most relevant part, what Nacho was saying the last 20 minutes was he said that this, because of the OGL, D&D is not cool anymore.
Hmm.
That was his big quote that everybody ran with. And his point in that is like, you know, enough fans, you know, got upset about the OGL that they don't have nearly the influence and the allure that they used to as a brand. And I think we can all agree on that. In fact, I would even double down on that and say it's not just that D&D is not cool; it's that the cool thing is to hate on D&D.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of where we're at least on in the social media environment. You know, as far as like, you know, us being on YouTube, you know, we like almost every video I put up, you know, I get a handful of comments about, well, just don't play it. Just don't play it. Play something else. Right. And so I think that's the cool thing to do, to hate on D&D. And they went into further discussion about kind of the direction of D&D and the RPG community as far as what's going to be popular, what's not. And that they talked about how Wizards of the Coast has probably lost a sizable market share. You know, especially with like they specifically mentioned Matt Colville's game and what's his name, Sanderson's game. So those are two of the examples they gave of games that are going to be taking large chunks of market share, than in Mike's opinion. My thing is, I think it's clear that there's a dip in the popularity of D&D right now, like a significant one, because of what I just said about how it's cool to hate on D&D right now. However, I also run games for kids, and like I see young kids all the time who are just dying to get into this hobby, right? Elementary school kids who, you know, 4 or 5 years from now are going to be high school kids with spending money, and who are going to be old enough and smart enough to be DMing their own games soon, right? So the 4th and 5th graders that I run games for now, you know, it's not going to be long before they're grown and they're full-fledged members of this hobby. And there's a bunch of them out there. There's a bunch of kids that are just chomping at the bit to get into this hobby. So I don't think D&D is ever going to, you know, die off. I think probably the biggest thing is like there's a regression towards the mean, right? We had a big spike in popularity in 2020 with the pandemic, and, you know, leading up to that with Stranger Things and Critical Role. And so in the grand history of this, I think that we're just going to see a regression. This is a regression towards the mean, kind of a stabilization point. And then D&D is going to, you know, steadily, you know, start growing. So if like we were to graph it, there'd be this big spike from like 2016 to 2020, and then a big drop off around 2023. And now it's just kind of gradually climbing back up.
So what we need is to get Mr. Beast to start promoting Morkborg, so all the little kids will want to play Morkborg instead. No, I'm just kidding. I think you're absolutely right, Brad. I think probably what we're going to see in the future is at the biggest part of the funnel is all these kids who've heard the name Dungeons and Dragons. They've never heard the name Pathfinder. They've, you know, never heard the name DC-20 or Daggerheart or Drawsteel. They've never heard, but they, you know, if a 6-year-old knows what Dungeons and Dragons is, kinda. You're going to see more, you know, at that top part of the funnel. But then I think once those kids get more to teenagers, you're going to see more splitting off into the other big popular games. Whereas maybe in the past, more of those kids would have stayed in the D&D ecosystem. But like Drawsteel's, it's going to be a popular game, and it's going to siphon off more than. But I still think D&D is it's the funnel, it's the entry point, the starting point for the majority of the addicts who get into TTRPGs. Gateway drug.
Yeah. And every time I go to my local game store, I see some like high school, young college age person or two in there buying the player's handbook. right? You know, and that's a new player purchase, right? It's not very often that, and a seasoned player goes in and gets a new copy of the player's handbook because they would have had it already, right?
Yeah.
But so like I said, it's almost every time I go in the store, there's at least one or two people buying, a player's handbook.
Yeah.
And they're all in that like I said, high school to college age bracket.
Ryan, you got any more thoughts on the Mike Merles interview, or are we ready to move on to
Yeah, I mean, I think
monsters?
the nuanced truth is that Hasbro shot themselves in the foot big time with the OGL thing. That's been beaten to death, but like, I was never surprised that they were trying to do the most profitable thing possible. I was surprised that they thought that was the most profitable thing possible because they've spawned a diaspora of partners and transformed them into competitors. And I've seen this. We've seen this movie before. They did that 20 years ago, and the same thing happened. So I think it's unequivocally true that D&D is suffering as a brand in the aftermath of all of that. At a point where this should be, the line should have continued the trajectory of like the 50th anniversary, Baldur's Gate 3, major motion picture, new everything coming out. This should be the peak, and it's hard to do counterfactuals, but like I think it would have been had it not been for all of that. All of that could be true while simultaneously D&D is and will remain the biggest thing in this industry. And if you want to talk to someone new, whether they're, a fifth grader or a 20-year-old or a 50-year-old who just has never entered the hobby before, they're coming through the gate of D&D. And if you meet them at that gate saying, that thing that you just got into sucks, you should really try my thing, you're not going to really get anywhere in that conversation. You got to meet these people where they are. If you're trying to get them to play Pathfinder or Nimble or Shadow Dark with you, yeah, D&D is cool, and this is better, this is why, they're a little more refined, make your pitch. But there's a lot of people running around with pitchforks still being like, D&D sucks, go play my game instead because it's cooler ethically for some reason. And that's not how you convert people.
Yeah, and Mr. Welch nails it right here, right? The only thing players care about is quality. Everything else is distractions, and you don't want to distract people from your product, right? And WotC just has gotten really good at doing that. Even just last week, we were talking about not having orc and drow stat blocks in the monster manual. Just don't do stupid stuff like that, right? Like little things, as you're the big dog on the playground, right? You're the one everybody's watching, and if you make changes without really thinking about how your fans are going to perceive those changes, then you're just putting more distractions out there. So everybody's hypersensitive about everything these days, and it's just don't do stuff like that. Don't give distractions with your brand new product. And overall, I think 5.5 is a good game. I think there's quality there. It's not a bad game by any stretch. But they've given so many distractions over the last 2 years.
Foot in mouth disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't we go ahead and move on? Because we got to make sure we have time for our main topic of the chapter 2 of the Dungeon Master's Guide later on. We got to make sure we got time for that. Let's talk about the Monster Manual. The 2024/25 Monster Manual is nigh. It's not officially out until February 18th, but see there, Ryan is holding up his physical copy. I don't yet have my physical copy, but Brad and I have had the digital copy for a few days now. All of us have had the digital copy, and we've got some art here. And so, first impressions, I'll start us off. The art in this book is phenomenal. I love it. Like this guy, this is one of my favorites right here. This guy, this devil guy. But holy crap, the art seriously impressed me. Like, way beyond expectations. I will say that. What do you guys think?
I agree with you on the art. The art is like spectacular. There's very few pieces in there that I'm like, ooh, they could have done better, right? I think maybe the Yuan T piece is like maybe one of the few pieces I was like, yeah, that one's kind of lame. But as a whole, like so many of these are just really good pieces of art that really convey the scene. In fact, well, I'll save that one for when we get to the Fiends part. But yeah, the art's great, and the monster design is solid. I was monkeying around with it the last couple of days because I gave away some free stat blocks with my last video about orcs, and was tinkering around building stat blocks. So I was digging into how the new stat blocks are designed, comparing them to how the old ones were designed while I was building those. And it's good, solid stuff.
Oh, speaking of that art, there was one other thing I wanted to point out. They talked about in the videos about this, about how they were going to have the art showing you more about what the monster can do in situations the monster would be in. And I came across this one earlier. This is a absolutely perfect example because see here, there's some kind of ooze chopping it in half, and you can see the surprise on this guy's face as he looks over to the creature to his right that the monster has split in two and now formed two monsters. Also, there's another clue. If you look in the background here, you see this ooze coming out through this grate, showing you something, this is a possible encounter scenario in a room with all of these grates or holes or sewer grates or whatever, and the ooze coming through it. So this, I don't think all of the art is as good as this one at showing a scene, but at least most of them show the monster like attacking or something. They show the monster doing something instead of like sitting on a throne, which was what you would see more in 2014.
Yeah, they got away from here's just like individual monster to these scenes which convey and kind of communicate something about how the monster works, which I appreciate as a dungeon master, because it grabs your attention and it helps you formulate your scenarios, your encounters. As a YouTuber, I don't appreciate it as much because it's not going to be as easy to grab a shot of a monster I need to put it in my video. But
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it does feel like they got the right people for the job. Like looking at these fiends, like this is realism the right word for this fantasy imaginative nightmare? But like the level of detail, it's a lot less like glossy cartoony when it has to be like this is just like weird horror heavy metal shit like those guys. There's some cool stuff going on. For the first time I'm like, ooh, maybe I do want to run a bunch of fiends. Like maybe I do want to go to hell here. Something they said in the feed video, which I want to pull chat as well as you guys. They kind of like let in like, yeah, fiends are like the most ubiquitous, easy to use thing that every monster manual is full of them, and every dungeon master uses them all the time. And like, I definitely have run a bunch of them, but like, it doesn't feel like my most used monster type, like by far, really. Like, are you guys throwing a lot of like demon versus devil, blood war vibes? Like, how often are you doing like a fiend based adventure, let alone a campaign?
Yeah,
often.
Not very often. But definitely watching their videos, it sure sounds like the games they must be running, like Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford and Todd Kendrick. It definitely sounds like the games they are running are very, very like multiversal, extraplanar kind of adventures. They seem to lean into that in their discussions about, using the monsters from other planes and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, and here, Wizards and Warp Drive says all tokens now have art on D&D Beyond maps. That was something that really bothered me before, was when you look up a monster on D&D Beyond and you just get that like displacer beast. So I don't even know what creature it was. It was like a panther silhouette.
Yep.
For quite a lot of pieces of art, and so every monster has art now, as far I'm going to go over every single stat block in detail, but it looks like they all have art now.
This is my theory. Is that like I don't run a ton of high level D&D. Like it's rare we're playing like 15th is like capstone for me a lot of the time. And I don't know if that puts me in the minority or not, but I don't think so. I mean, my personal tastes are like lower magic, crunchier, more deadly. But yeah, just like it's not even that like their games are that way. It just seemed like, oh, this is objectively true that like everyone's running Fiends all the time. And I was like, hey, okay, am I? I mean, looking at this art, I think I'm going to run Fiends more often for sure. And there's always someone's always a Rakshasa in one of my campaigns. Spoilers. There's always one of those guys messing around somewhere. But
so what about overall thoughts on things like stat blocks, formats, that kind of stuff? This is the Dretch, who's absolutely horrific. That art almost makes me want to puke. Pustules. I don't do well with pustules, but
it's an onomatopoeia. It's the sounds you make when you see it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best monster manuals we've seen. I think that's fair to say. It's they definitely trimmed the fat on the stat blocks, but it seems pretty solid and usable still, even with the cutting back on verbiage. The art, like we said, is great, and the monsters seem more powerful than they were in 5th edition, which we know is what we need for the more powerful players in 5.5. So I'm happy with it. I think it's a good book for sure.
It's funny, it must be the dungeon master in me, but when I saw the new PHB and how super powered all the PC, all the extra things they got, I'm like, I don't know, that's maybe too much. Maybe slow down the game, maybe not balanced, but when they beef up the monsters, I'm like, oh yes. Give me that monster power.
Well, and I know I've said this before, like as a DM, we're players too, and the game needs to be fun for us, right? And if every stat block is a variation of a bear, right, then it gets really boring running the same monster, over and over again with just a different skin on it. If everything's just, claw, bite, So I like seeing, the monsters that have bonus actions and reactions. Like even some of the NPC stat blocks, like the scout, I think it's called the scout captain NPC stat block. It now has a bonus action aim, and then if it has advantage to hit, or then it does extra damage.
Yeah, it has like the rogues like steady aim now.
Right. Yeah. So that's just a cool little feature that makes that scout captain more interesting to run than what was it also? It's because it's challenge rating 3, right? The archer. There's the alternative in the older edition was the archer, right? The challenge rating 3 archer that was like in Volo's guide, I think. So comparable power level, but this one's far more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's more interesting for the players too when you have interesting monsters, when you have more variety in the monsters. It does sometimes feel like it comes around to the monster's turn. It's like, all right, claw, bite, Whereas, they're doing stuff, especially stuff like these NPCs. Like the way I run stuff, like there's a chance you convince the scout captain to be on your side, and like a player's running this stat block, not me. So the humanoids all having more interest and utility is interesting to me, and they're all, from like first looks, everything is punchier in both senses of the word. They've like tightened up the stat blocks. I can see it's much harder for me to get lost into like, all right, go through all the spells and abilities to see, like I'm a lot less likely to forget something and curse myself on the ride home that I forgot some element of running the monster. And a lot of things are hitting harder. They don't have let's call them trap choices for the dungeon master. A lot of them have some boost to their HP, so they're going to last long enough to actually do half of this stuff. A lot of things that I've been doing and advising a lot of people do behind the screen, like now is official. The monsters have now been rebalanced to 10 years of power creep on the player side of things.
The scout captain would make a nice level 1 adventure boss because they have a weakness. They have a special ability, that aim ability, and so that's something the PCs could learn. You know, if you let the scout captain pause to aim, he's going to hit real hard. So that's like a weakness they could find out to exploit. I don't know. That's just what I thought of.
Yeah, and if you can take those abilities, right, and telegraph them, you know, one way or another, either like you fought this monster before or a variation of this monster before, then now the energy of the DM is thinking of stuff like Jim just said. Ooh, how could I telegraph to my players that this monster has this ability, and then make it part of the combat where they now have to try to take away this ability, right? That makes an interesting combat. Spending your energy doing that now is what you have available to you, as opposed to in 5th edition, you were spending your energy trying to figure out, how do I make this guy tougher because he kind of sucks.
Indeed.
Yes. You need, like, we can step up on that, like, hierarchy of needs now. It's like, all right, this thing's gonna last 3 rounds and not totally fall flat on its face from the jump. Cool. Now I have some cognitive power left over to make it cool, exploit the tactics, make the tactics narratively interesting. And now if the monster's exercising tactics, now the PCs are also going to start thinking much more tactically, strategizing how they're going to deal with the next version of this that they see. Opposed to just, if I run up and punch the thing hard enough times, I don't know, that gets a lot less fun.
Yeah.
Fred here says the lore and story on monsters has been significantly reduced. It's difficult to connect monsters to the adventure story with less lore. What do you guys think about that? I think I need to spend more time reading the monster stat blocks. Does the reduced lore give you more? Is it too wide, or is it not narrow enough?
I think it's the cost benefit of having more monsters, essentially, and more interesting monsters, and more, it's in a lot of places you have, all right, here's the minion version of this, here's the boss version of this. They've stuffed this book full of stat blocks, and to do that they've removed lore, and that's my main criticism of the book. Honestly, I like that stuff. It seemed clear that they assumed that that most people aren't reading that part of the book, and anything that's not in the stat block people are missing, and I think that's maybe a user malfunction, more of like maybe read the book. But I'm with Fred on that one. I'm hoping maybe we get some more on the adventure side, or like we got a pair of setting guides coming out. Maybe that lore is being brought somewhere else. This is like the baseline chassis, and make it what you will. And here's what goblins or gnolls or whatever look like in Forgotten Realms. Because that is very suggestive to me in my adventure design, encounter design even. Like, okay, what's the story here with these things? How is that going to interact with other kinds of monsters and other narrative arcs that are happening in my world? And a lot of that is way stripped down, if not missing entirely. We're getting 2-3 sentences instead of 2-3 paragraphs,
right,
in the 2014 version.
I think this is a matter of like where they are paying attention to their audience. So old grognards like us, right? We like that lore. We want to read all that stuff. But I think Ryan's right. A lot of the younger players aren't reading all that extra stuff. They even pretty much said that in one of their videos. So if that's the case, right? If you know that a large amount of your players aren't reading all this extra stuff, from a business model, it makes sense to put more stat blocks in, less lore in, because nobody's reading it anyway, right? Then sell another product that's going to give you lore, right? So when you make an adventure that's about orcs, right, then you have some lore about these orcs. When you make an adventure about a dragon, you have more lore about dragons, right? So more incentive to buy the adventure books or the splat books, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if that was a conscious decision on their part, to recognize that especially their younger audience are going to get more excited when they see more stat blocks, and no one's really going to miss the lore except for a small percentage of people like us.
This is kind of unrelated, but Twin Steel recommends the Forgotten Realms wiki. I've been on the Forgotten Realms wiki many times. I have a very specific and nitpicky complaint about the Forgotten Realms wiki, is that it's all written in the past tense. Which, when you're speaking about fiction, you speak about it in the present tense, because it never happened. It didn't happen in the past. It didn't happen in the present or the future. So that's the grammarian in me. When you're writing about literature or fiction, you refer to it in the present tense. Anyway,
I prefer the future tense. It's prophetic. It's like, this is what's going to go down. It is tricky, because in the especially that wiki, it's additions worth of knowledge, and just like a lot of comic book universes, they've hit the reset button a couple times. So like, these gods fought and this one died, and then there was a magical disease and everything started over and they never existed in the first place. It's like very convoluted in some ways. So I think maybe that's one argument for being like closing the loop, if they're making it past tense. But
I refuse to buy
I know
your
it's the English
explanation.
major in me is like, "Rrr."
Anyway, any other broad monster manual thoughts? We're ready to dive into Fiends. We're going to talk about friends today. Oh, sorry, Fiends.
Oh, I'm
not prepared to talk about Fiends.
So my main, I do wish there was more lore. I'm a lore guy. I think mechanically, one thing that shows through the entirety of the monster manual is they've all but done away with, all right, you got hit by the monster, you take X amount of this kind of damage, roll a save. And I understand that speeds up the game and also kind of adjusts the balance in the monster's favor. Like, if you get hit, you're prone, you're poisoned, whatever. It just comes along with it. But I personally like that dramatic beat of like, okay, player, your fate is now in your hands. I'm saying these words because something's bad is coming down the pipe if you fail this save. I don't think making the monsters simpler, I don't think having the monsters do less mechanically I think it's fixing the wrong problem as far as making combat faster and punchier. But I'm curious what you guys think about that, because I see both sides of the argument, but I don't know if I like it.
I think I like the idea that, at least when it's streamlined in this way, where it's either a roll to hit or a roll to save, like taking out the extra step where you have to roll to hit and this happens, and then you roll a save and this also happens.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to have mostly taken that out, and I think I like that. I think that does speed up the game without necessarily losing any flavor. That was my take on that. And the other thing I noticed is some of the monsters, like, they'll have like a magic sword attack. It'll be like fiendish blade or something like that. And so the sword now just does like a shit ton of fire damage instead of 2d10 slashing damage and then 3d10 fire damage, right? They just put it all like 5d10 fire damage. And then in the gear, the monster's gear is a sword, but the sword is not a magic sword. It's just that the monster has the power that makes that sword turn to fire, right? So they streamlined it kind of in that way, but also then, made it clear to the DM that this monster's not going to drop a rare magic item.
Hmm. Yeah, so we're ready to talk about Fiends.
Yeah.
So Jeremy Crawford and the other guy whose name I can never remember.
Poor other guy.
Sorry, other guy. If you're watching, put your name in chat. Let us know who you are, and we'll make sure you get the proper respect you deserve. So one thing they said at the beginning I thought was really interesting. Fiends spend more time fighting each other than fighting people or humanoids or player characters. They did talk about the differences between demons and devils, and also stressed about how Yugoloths, succubi, and incubi are a separate group, which wasn't exactly clear how the Yugoloths, succubi, and incubi are all kind of lumped together. That part I wasn't exactly clear on, but I've never been very invested in Yugoloth lore. I've never included one in a game. But the succubi and incubi are interesting. I didn't know this. Maybe they've always been able to do this, but a succubus can become an incubus and back and forth. They can change from one to the other. Is that new?
That's new game mechanics. I think that's actually true to the lore. I think the actual lore of the succubus was that it could change shape. So the incubus and succubus also have different types of abilities. So they said instead of focusing on these things are different because of gender, here's the succubus that's like this, and here's the incubus that's like that. One's female, one's male. They made them both able to be either male or female. But the succubus focuses on
manipulation through seduction.
Right. And the other one focuses on entering your dreams and messing with your dreams, kind of like a like we've seen hags do in other adventures. Which I thought that was cool.
Yeah,
Ryan, you got thoughts?
I like it. Yeah, I don't love the gender stat block thing is going to upset some folks, and that's funny to me. It's much more interesting for me to be like, yeah, this thing is like one lore wise, like folklore wise, like it's whatever you want it to be. It's whatever it needs to be the most alluring version in the eye of the beholder. So that makes sense to me. I like having more variety. Yeah, here's like the astral version and like the super physical version of this like demonic creature that's trying to manipulate you as much as possible.
There's some they've spent a lot of time in these videos talking about reorganizing, categorizing, and changing. And there are some creatures that are now fiends. Gnolls, we already knew that. We already knew gnolls were fiends because of their god worship. Sahuagin are now fiends, because they're traditionally been called sea devils. And they also wanted to set them apart from other sea creatures because there were a lot of things swimming around in the sea that they said Dungeon Masters didn't know what to do with, because they're like, this is like that, is like that, is like that. They're all claw bite in a fish suit. And so they've been trying to differentiate them.
Yeah, so now you got the Sahuagin, who are fiends. You've got the Kautoa, who are aberrations, and the merfolk are now elementals. Mm-hmm. So the different types of fish people all have kind of a different extraplanar origin.
I have thoughts. We'll get to elementals later today, I believe. It was in the Fiends video where I again, as someone who hasn't run a ton of Fiends, going to devil or demon to find some impronounceable word that I can't say and could barely spell was always a challenge for me. Being like, okay, flipping between the two, or it's like, this thing's a Yugoloth. Man, it's neutral. I forgot. Okay, whereas like in this particular in the demon video, they're like, yeah, it's alphabetical now, and I was like, amazing. Until I bought the book and started playing with it, and like, green hag is under G, and that seems better if you're coming from zero. But like, no, I'm looking for hags H. And I don't know, I was talking to some other folks about this the other day, and it's like, this might be old man yells at sky, but like, I thought I knew the alphabet, guys, but I am really struggling to find things in here in practice way more often than I think. Like the dragons aren't together. The dragons go by color. But then the violet fungi is under fungi. So they're not playing by one rule here. And I find it very frustrating. And that's, two days of experience so far. But in practice at the table, I've been struggling to find stat blocks sometimes. And part of it's like, okay, I'm looking for the acolyte, and now it's a priest. The acolyte. What were you saying?
Did you look up monsters that way in the 2014 physical book monster manual a lot?
Yeah, I'm a physical guy. Yeah, I like to have the book at the table.
So it's sort of like a muscle memory problem, kind of.
That's
potentially
That's part of it. Part of it's muscle memory, but part of it's them not following their own rules succinctly, right? Like green slod is slod, green hag is green hag. And then violet fungi is under fungus with the other fungus under the screechers. It's all, you want some of the stuff you want to be together, right? And that works out with were creatures. And okay, there's a table at the back, right? Like I can see like, okay, here's all of the undead. Ogre zombie is still under zombie. Yeah, there's a lot of inconsistencies to this design that again, it's day 0, it's day 2 for me actually physically using this book, but I'm having issues with it. And that seems to be like dragons are not together. Dragons are by color. Green dragon and copper dragon are, black dragon and then copper dragon and then, 50 pages later green dragon. But not young, but young. It's under G. It's not under young green dragon. It's under green dragon.
Yeah, that was the whole thing before, was that they were grouped alphabetically by category. So if you were looking for a gelatinous cube, you had to go to O. So you had to know that it was an ooze before you could find it in the book. And so they've done it this way so that so ideally it's to make it easier for new people who already know that a gelatinous cube is an ooze, because that alphabetized that way is only useful for people who already know what they're looking for.
Right, and that makes sense, but not putting a green hag and a night hag under hags, that to me it doesn't make sense. Right.
And even if you do that, right? Like even if you make the choice that I disagree with, red slod, blue slod, green slod are under slod. So like you clearly recognize that sometimes that's the way to do things. I feel like that's the way to do things for dragons and hags. Like there's a lot of like, it should be hag, comma, green in my brain.
Well, we should check in with you again in 6 months and see if the new categorization has grown on you, or if you're still shaking your fist at that cloud.
Brian, angry.
Let's see, what else did they say? They said, I liked this quote. They said, "Devils are orderly and corruptive. Demons are chaotic and primal." I paraphrased that a bit to make it more succinct, but I did like that description, because for lots of differences between devils and demons, but that feels very succinct. And one thing they said I thought was kind of interesting is that demons are more setting agnostic, because the devils can really only be from the hells, right? But demons, the abyss fits into more settings, I guess. I don't know. Do you guys have a take on that? I'm not quite sure I understood that.
Yeah, I never really thought of it that way. I've always thought of it, you just kind of knowing what I know from religion and mythology outside of gaming. I've always thought of it as like devils are more like the Western version of demons. Like when we think of demons in like Western religions and Western theologies, you think of them as this kind of hierarchical, fallen angel type creatures, right? But then if you think of it in Eastern mythology, those are more like your demons, right? The more chaotic, bloodlusts, driven by rage and hunger to destroy things. That's always the way I've thought of it. And I'm not a mythology scholar, but that was always just my kind of headcanon.
Well, it's funny they said that early in the video, Todd asks, "Why do we have so many devils and demons in Dungeons and Dragons?" And Jeremy just said, "Well, it goes back to the beginning of the game." And I think it goes back to my theory that at their offices in Lake Geneva, they had a thesaurus and a set of Encyclopedia Britannicas. And there are lots and lots and lots of synonyms for devils and demons across various languages and cultures. That's why we have so many, because they found a lot of words that they could turn into monsters.
Yep.
And especially in the 70s, if you're looking at Encyclopedia Britannica, you're finding more Greek and Latinate, Western roots. To answer Nacho, yes, there is an alphabetized index in the very front of the book, which feels unnecessary in a book that's supposedly in alphabetical order. But yes, I didn't even think to. I went to the back and not the front because. Yes. But there is a shortcut there.
Yeah. And the other thing with devils and demons, you mentioned, Jim, the idea that they fight each other more than they fight the material plane, right? Which I've always thought that's kind of an interesting aspect to the lore. That the demons come from the abyss, which I'm not sure if it's still canon, but back in the first edition lore, the abyss had 666 levels. And hell only has 9. So there's a whole lot more demons than there are devils. And the two of them are constantly at war, but the devils, being lawful evil, are organized into a hierarchy for the most part. And the demons, being chaos, they fight each other as much as they fight the devils. And then the devils are fighting the demons as well. So there's this lore is these things are just constantly, like playing Warhammer 40K with each other. There's just nobody's a good guy. Everybody's out to get everybody, and they're constantly at war. And so I just think that's interesting lore. And so one way I think of like using those creatures in your game is just having the fringes of all that spill over into the material plane every once in a while. So like in my campaign right now, my players just defeated a whole group of gnolls. And I incentivized the warlock player who worships the devil, by saying your patron would hate these things because they're demons. Like your patron's a devil and these things are demons. So, your patron really wants you to take this quest. I did it in a more flavorful way than that. But that's the short version.
Yeah. Getting the party caught up between two warring factions is always a great way to spur some kind of adventure to come out of it.
Twice I've been fortunate enough to use the line, "What's the difference between a devil and a demon?" in a campaign right before a demon double-crossed the party, is that you can make a deal with the devil. The demon's always going to stab you in the back if you let it out in the containment circle it's been in for centuries, since that wizard lost his mind or whatever.
So another thing that they mentioned that I hadn't noticed before is that there are cultists now for essentially every kind of monster.
That I like.
There's a demon cultist. It's still a humanoid, but they have some demon-like powers as a result of. I can find that in here somewhere.
Yeah, there's like a fiend cultist and an elemental cultist and a aberration, aberrant cultist or something like that. Yeah,
I got the fiend cultist right here. They are so they're medium or small humanoid, neutral evil, but they get stuff like hellish rebuke. They get a packed weapon. They get some. Yeah, so they're definitely not actually a fiend. They're just big fans. They're just big fans. They're such big fans that get Scorching Ray and Fireball. Well, level 6 fireball for CR8. I guess that's not so intense, but twice a day fireball. That's a lot.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so they what if you go back to that page real quick, Jim, and scroll down, that's one thing they've put in there in place of lore are those tables. And those tables can be helpful for giving you adventure ideas. So that I think is a decent trade-off. If you're not getting a bunch of text to read for lore, you're at least getting some generative ideas out of these tables.
This
Right.
goes back to a really good point that Glenn made earlier. Whereas when you have 6, 7, 8 kinds of cultists all together, you can have a little front matter. And I think that's where a lot of the lore used to be that we're missing now. We don't have that couple paragraphs on hags now that the hags are split up. I like those tables a lot. I wish there were more of them, but everybody knows that I'm a table guy.
Yeah.
I think every monster, at least type, should have those.
Yeah, your brand is named after tables.
Yeah, my preferences show.
What else did they talk about? Todd told a terrible joke about something about nightmares. I just wrote Todd joke nightmares. I don't even remember what he said.
Yeah, yeah. Um, their running bit on puns isn't as clever as our running bit on chapter 2 of the DM's Guide.
What do you mean, bit? What else do you guys want to say about demons? Or are we ready to move on to elementals? I got a heart out in 19 minutes.
Okay, yeah, let's go. Let's go elementals. I like elementals.
So, what do you think about lizard folk being earth elementals now?
I hate it.
Yeah, I personally, of all the monster types and of all the planes, elemental is the stuff I understand the least. Like conceptually, I understand a being made out of fire. Okay, that makes sense. But in the fire plane, there are castles and stuff. Like, I don't quite understand it. I never like to use it in my campaigns because I'm like, I can't rationalize in my brain how in the air realm there are people, there are cities in the air plane where everything is made of air. How are there cities with steel and glass and stuff? It's I don't know. I don't like elementals in general. It's weird to me. It doesn't fit in my brain.
I guess you could try to think of it like sci-fi, like Star Wars, right? Like the in sci-fi you've seen like Cloud City, right? That was a planet that was all like a gas giant, and the people lived in these floating cities, right?
Mm.
And you could conceptualize like if there were aliens that lived on a really hot planet, they would be resistant to fire and be able to exist there. Um, so I don't know. Does that help your
Mm.
concept of the elemental planes any?
I love
They
elementals. I don't like the planes. I don't go there. I don't do that because I have the same issue. City of Brass works for me almost like everything here is Earth. It's like, cool. How do you breathe? What do you
yeah,
what
I
are we
don't know
doing?
how I would answer that question from a player.
Right.
It'd be like, oh, this is the plane of water. Why is there a Ruby Tuesdays in a city? And I'd
Because
be
they
like,
sponsored us.
I don't know. It's magic. Is because it's magic? Anyway, that's enough about my personal complaints. um, so they told us there are some new elementals, merfolk, Aarakocra, lizard folk, the lizard folk geomancer specifically in Genasi. So each of the different elements has a new member.
Hmm.
Is that a
Yeah. So
merfolk right there?
so the Aarakocra represent the plane of air.
Mm-hmm.
The merfolk are now water elementals. The Azer are the fire. They've always been fire elementals, and then now lizard folk are the earth. So they basically took three of the species that were formerly humanoids in order to make an elemental race for each of the four flavors of elemental.
And I like two of them. If we did the full, like, the blendings that Phil's talking about, like if the lizard folk were like mud people, right? Like it's like
Swamp. Yeah.
swampy. There's a like they have a swim speed, right? Don't they?
Yeah.
Like something from the Earth plane doesn't have a swim speed in my headcanon.
Yeah. That one
They're
felt
lizards. I don't know.
that one felt like a stretch to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
They spent quite a bit of time talking about their elemental cataclysm, which is their new high CR elemental creature. It's pictured here looking quite a bit like Tiamat, but they described it as you could really do it more just like a weather pattern, like a giant storm that accomplishes all the same types of damage. And they said that they think that because it's so powerful, campaigns revolving around this would be more like controlling the cataclysm, pointing it in a certain direction, and doing those sorts of things with it.
Yeah. I mean, you could just change the damage type to slashing or piercing, I guess. Just take this stat block, change all the damage types to piercing, and now you have your Sharknado.
There it is.
But you also got to give it ability like a spawn shark kind of ability. Like some of the sharks can leave the tornado,
Right.
and then they become their own separate creatures. That way you can have waves while you're fighting the Sharknado. And we are now, this is our next Landlocked Warlocks project, as we're writing this as a one shot. I'm sure 5e Sharknado exists out there already, right? Somebody had to have already done that.
But not 5.5. If we get there first, we can plant our flag.
There we go. They talked about the Zorn. They did spend a few minutes talking about the Zorn because I think, in my opinion, the Zorn is one of the most terrifying creatures in Dungeons and Dragons, especially because the higher level you are, the more terrifying it is. Because the higher level you are, you're going to have better stuff that you don't want to get eaten. Like when you're low level, a rust monster is pretty terrifying. You know, when all you've got is your sword and your shield and your plate mail. If that could all be gone, you're hosed. But at higher levels, the idea of losing those very precious magic items that you spent weeks and weeks questing to retrieve, it's terrifying.
Just the idea, like, I smell that diamond that you've been keeping in your back pocket for the resurrection spell this whole time. Like, launch. Done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, they're just weird. They're just like the right amount of weird.
So do we want to say anything else about elementals, or we want to move on? Because I do want to get to our roundtable discussion.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Next, so kind of quick. Nope. I lost it. The WotC just dropped a new adventure called Hold Back the Dead. And what it looks like, this is some kind of, like, they made it for Project Sigil, I think. Because I get emails about Project Sigil, and they talked about how they redid the Project Sigil default adventure, and I think it's this one now.
Oh, interesting.
It's called Hold Back the Dead. I'm trying to bring up the copy of it right here. Damn it. I hate how the D&D Beyond store and website are two different things. And
hey, you bought this thing? Cool. Good luck finding it.
Yeah, right.
Here, have it for free, and you'll
They
never
don't
see it again.
They don't talk to each other. Well, basically, it's I won't be able to show it, but it is a one shot, basically written like a tower defense, where there are waves of enemies. You're in the middle. It reminded me a lot of Orcs Must Die, that video game series.
It does cool stuff in a very tight package. I like the idea of, like, I mean, one, here's a free one shot. Cool. Yeah. You get me to click that button any day. But like, here's a free one shot that's doing different stuff. Here is 5 weird ballista weapons, one from each city of the Sword Coast, the Lord's Alliance, I should say. They behave a little bit differently. The players can absolutely like choose which one they want to pilot. And I'm a huge advocate of waves of enemy. Like, if you want to make combat interesting, don't start with all the pieces on the field. Keep them coming. There's a little like intrigue in it. It's all very quick and punchy, and I could definitely see like ripping this thing apart and using it in pieces wherever. Like an undead army assaulting some slightly defended fortress is a easy thing to insert into a drag and drop into a lot of campaigns.
And for as many sins as WotC commits, it's nice that they do give us free stuff like this from time to time, right? I don't know if this was like a bonus for buying something else or if this was just 100% totally free.
Straight up free. Comes with stat blocks and maps. Like, you legit don't need another book to run. I mean, you need the basic rules, I guess. But
another place sometimes is on the D&D Beyond blog. They sneakily include encounters and adventures in there. One of my favorite little one-shots I ever ran was called, like, not a familiar problem, because I think that's the Darrington Press one, but it was something named very similar where I ran where they were all wizards familiars who were trying, like, the wizard was like got knocked out, bumped his head and got knocked out, and so you're trying to help the wizard. And it was a lot of fun, and it was just like a blog post on D&D Beyond. It was like, here, play a familiar. And so, I don't know. I think it's nice that they do that they give us this stuff for free.
Yeah, it's a good thing for them to give out some free stuff, and it makes it easy to point new players in that direction. Like when I see people ask online, I'm brand new, where do I get started? You can just point them to one of these free adventures or to, and the free rules and all that sort of stuff.
Worth mentioning what Phil's saying here. You do need like an account with D&D Beyond to claim it, which means a credit card number. So that's a part of the transaction I don't like, but they already have my information, and it's already been stolen so many times that like, what's one more?
Go ahead.
One thing I've noticed with D&D Beyond is ever since the new monster manual came out, I can access all the monsters, even from adventures that I've never purchased.
Really?
Oh,
yeah. So I don't know if that's a glitch, but right now I've been able to access stuff from, like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be saying this so loud.
Keep your voice down, Brad. Say it low.
But yeah, I thought I thought that was interesting. I noticed that the last couple of days. I was like, wait a second, did I buy that? And then I started clicking around. I don't know.
Yeah, if it's free isn't enough to entice you to check out that adventure. Zombie ogres run up, puts ladders up so the skeletons can climb. That probably doesn't work, so they start catapulting zombies at you, and then it escalates from there. So it's fun. It sounds fun.
We forgot to say it earlier, but hey, go subscribe to the Landlocked Warlocks. If you're watching it on Landlocked Warlocks right now, and hit the little subscribe button. We would really appreciate that. And anything else to say about Hold Back the Dead? Are we ready to move on to what we're really here for today?
Hit me with some Wayans brothers, Jim. What do you got cooking there?
So I didn't know this, but one of you put in the agenda that the Dungeons and Dragons movie from the year 2000, you can watch on YouTube, which I don't know if you have to pay for it or it says free. So it's probably just with ads, probably just an ad at the beginning, maybe couple ad breaks throughout. But so the Dungeons and Dragons movie here, I want to share this. There's an article from The Ringer about the original Dungeons and Dragons movie. And this movie, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but what I do remember most is this guy and his blue lips. This guy who's got this like kind of Yul Brenner thing going. I don't know. It says his name is Bruce Payne. He did not go on to fame and fortune after this movie. But so this is the lead. I have no idea who this person is. I've never seen this person before or since. And then there's not a picture of Marlon Wayans, but so our discussion topic today. In the original Dungeons & Dragons movie, this guy and Marlon Wayans played his sidekick. And Marlon Wayans' casting was obviously terrible. So let's talk about, in chat, you need to get involved as well, Yes Twin Steel. It was truly a classic. Which Wayans brother should have been cast instead? Let me give you a quick little rundown of the Wayans family. At the top, you've got Keenan Ivory Wayans. He's the brains behind the whole operation. He's the visionary. He's the executive producer. Then you have Damon Wayans. Damon is really the funny one. If you saw it in Living Color, he was the bald one. He's the funny one, but he's also got the dramatic chops. I've seen him do more serious stuff. Now, modern day, Damon Wayans Jr., his son, is a fantastic actor. He's great. But going back to the original generation, you got Keenan, you got Damon. To that, you have Sean, or SW1, from the DJ from In Living Color. He's kind of the cool one. And then you have Marlon, who I think might actually be a cousin. I'm not sure if he's a brother. Marlon is the wacky one. Marlon got cast in this movie, and he was terrible. So I'm going to open it up to the floor. Which Wayans brother should have been cast in this role?
I'm going to go with Damon.
Yeah.
Because I have, like you said, he can go both ways. He can do the dramatic stuff as well as the comedy.
I think he can.
Yeah. So that would be my pick.
Wait, what? Wait, Marlon Wayans was in the sequel as the villain? I definitely did not see those direct-to-DVD rights holding grab sequels that they made.
I think the unknown guy, that guy. I think that's the one that comes back as the villain in the sequel.
Really?
Is that who he's talking about? Or is he just messing with us?
No, he's saying Twin Steel is saying Snails. Snails is Marlon Wayans, but he dies. Spoiler, he gets killed in the movie. Is he like an undead? Anyway, if Marlon Wayans is playing the villain, I do need to actually see this now. Because maybe he totally redeems his performance and kills it. Maybe he nails it in the second movie.
My dream cast here is Marlon Wayans stays as Snails, and everybody else gets recast as one of the Wayans brothers.
Everyone else is puppets.
Everyone else.
No,
it's giving Labyrinth a little bit.
Or maybe Marlon Wayans could play all the roles, like an Eddie Murphy Clumps kind of situation.
I'm out.
No, too rich for your blood.
How about you do the whole movie with members from In Living Color?
Okay, there we go.
Because then you get to include Jim Carrey in there as well.
David Allen Greer.
Yeah. Now I think we're cooking with an idea.
Oh, also Thora Birch was in the movie, fresh off her success from the multiple Oscar-winning film American Beauty. Yeah,
I just had this weird time vertigo. I was like, that was the same time? Oh my good. Yeah, I mean well, yeah, of course. It's D&D.
I want to know what they were doing with the blue lips on the villain. What was that about?
I don't remember. But if you look on the movie poster, his lips are not blue. So whoever designed the movie poster was like, this is stupid. We're not doing that. Whoever made the movie poster had more sense than anyone who made this movie.
In some of the original D&D lore, hobgoblins have blue noses. Hobgoblins are supposed to have like red skin and blue noses.
They were like baboony, right?
Kind of,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know of any lore in D&D with blue lips.
I don't know. Chat, let us know who out there has the blue lips. Well, I think we're kind of about out of time, but I feel like we've given you a lot to think about out there, viewer. And if you didn't get a chance to chime in about which Wayans brother you thought should have been cast, then it's too late because we're done talking about him. You missed your chance.
Warner Brothers also released 29 other movies for free on YouTube, and a couple of them are maybe better received than the 2000 Dungeons and Dragons one.
You remember, this was the year after The Matrix came out. Like, it feels like 25 years ago was a long time and the movies were old and crappy then, but The Matrix came out the year before this.
Yeah. So there's no real excuse for this movie being as bad as it was. No, but it's 4:20 and Jim has a heart out.
Well,
Suspicious.
I don't know what you're implying, but hold on. Anyway, so thank you for watching. We love you. We appreciate you. Please subscribe to Landlocked Warlocks and go follow us on our individual channels, of which I'm GM Jim and my channel is Wizards and Wordslingers. This guy down here,
Brad Wolf with Dire Den.
Brian Doyle, Verdigris Table.
all right. Hey, thanks for watching, and see you next time.